What if I told you that thousands of years before Christianity, before Islam, before Judaism even took its final form, there was a religion that believed in one God, heaven and hell, angels and demons, and a final judgment day? What if this ancient faith, born in the deserts of ancient Persia, actually shaped almost everything we believe about good and evil today? Most people have never heard of it, yet its influence is everywhere. This is the story of Zoroastrianism, the world's first monotheistic religion, and trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see the world differently. Imagine you're standing in ancient Persia, around 1500 BCE, maybe earlier. The world is filled with gods, hundreds of them, spirits in every tree, every river, every mountain. People worship fire, they worship water, they make sacrifices to countless deities hoping for good harvests, healthy children, victory in battle. It's a world of chaos, really, where you never know which god might help you or hurt you on any given day. And then one man appears who says something absolutely revolutionary. His name is Zarathustra, or as the Greeks called him, Zoroaster. And what he says changes everything. Zoroaster looks at this mess of gods and spirits and says, "No, wait, you've got it all wrong. There aren't hundreds of gods fighting for control. There's one supreme God, one creator of everything, and his name is Ahura Mazda, which means the wise Lord. One God who created the universe, who set the stars in motion, who breathed life into humanity." Sound familiar? It should, because this idea, this concept of one all-powerful, all-knowing deity was brand new. This was the first time in human history that someone stood up and said, the divine isn't scattered across 1,000 shrines, it's unified, it's one, it's singular. But here's where it gets really interesting. Zoroaster didn't just say there's one God and leave it at that. He built an entire cosmology, an entire understanding of existence that would echo through millennia. He said that Ahura Mazda created the world as a perfect place, but there's an opponent, an adversary called Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, the destructive spirit. And these two forces, good and evil, light and darkness, truth and lies, they're locked in an eternal battle. Not because Ahriman is equal to God, no, but because Ahura Mazda gave humans and spiritual beings free will. And with free will comes choice, and with choice comes the possibility of choosing wrong. Think about that for a second. This is the birth of dualism, the idea that existence is a battleground between good and evil. Before Zoroaster, most religions didn't really have this concept. Gods could be good or bad depending on their mood. They could help you or harm you based on whether you sacrificed the right animal. But Zoroaster said, no, good is good, evil is evil, and you have to choose a side. There's no sitting on the fence. Every thought you think, every word you speak, every action you take, it's either adding to the light or adding to the darkness. And humanity's purpose, our entire reason for existing, is to choose good, to fight alongside Ahura Mazda against the forces of chaos and destruction. Now let's talk about what happens when you die, because this is where Zoroastrianism really pioneered ideas that we take for granted today. Zoroaster taught that when you die, your soul doesn't just disappear, and it doesn't get reincarnated into another body like in Hinduism or Buddhism. No, your soul crosses a bridge called the Chinvat Bridge. Picture this, a narrow bridge spanning a chasm, and your soul has to walk across it. If you lived a good life, if you chose truth over lies, kindness over cruelty, the bridge becomes wide and easy to cross, and you enter heaven, the house of song, a place of eternal light and joy. But if you lived an evil life, if you chose selfishness and destruction, the bridge becomes narrow as the razor's edge, and you fall into hell, a place of darkness and suffering. Does this sound familiar? Of course it does, because this concept of judgment after death, of heaven and hell, of your earthly actions determining your eternal fate, this became central to Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. But Zoroaster was teaching this thousands of years before the Bible was even written. He was the first to say that morality matters not just for society, but for your soul's eternal destiny. That's revolutionary. That's the kind of idea that changes civilizations. But wait, there's more. Zoroaster didn't just teach about individual judgment, he taught about the end of time itself. He said that history has an arc, that it's moving towards something. One day, at the end of time, there will be a final battle between good and evil, a last confrontation where Ahura Mazda and the forces of good will finally defeat Angra Mainyu once and for all. And then something miraculous happens. The world will be purified, renewed, made perfect again. The dead will be resurrected, yes, resurrected, brought back to life in perfected bodies. And everyone will live in a paradise on earth, a world without suffering, without death, without evil. Sound like the Book of Revelation? Sound like Islamic eschatology? It should, because this apocalyptic vision, this idea of history moving towards a final judgment and cosmic renewal, started with Zoroaster. This is the original end times prophecy. Christians call it the Second Coming. Islam calls it the Day of Judgment, but Zoroastrians were teaching this concept thousands of years earlier. They pioneered the idea that time isn't cyclical, endlessly repeating, but linear, moving towards an ultimate purpose, an ultimate victory of good over evil. Now let's talk about how you're supposed to live, because Zoroastrianism isn't just about belief, it's about action. The core teaching can be summed up in 3 phrases: good thoughts, good words, good deeds. Simple, right? But profound. Every thought in your head should align with truth and goodness. Every word from your mouth should be honest and constructive. Every action you take should make the world better, not worse. This isn't just moral philosophy, it's spiritual warfare. Every good deed you do is literally helping Ahura Mazda push back the darkness. You're not just being a good person, you're a soldier in a cosmic battle. And here's something beautiful about Zoroastrianism that often gets overlooked. It's deeply ecological. Zoroastrians believe that all of creation is good, that the physical world isn't something to escape from, like in some Eastern religions, but something to protect and cherish. Fire, water, earth, air, these aren't just elements, they're sacred. To pollute water is a sin. To waste resources is evil. To harm the environment unnecessarily is siding with Angra Mainyu. Thousands of years before modern environmentalism, Zoroastrians were teaching that humans have a sacred duty to be stewards of creation. How's that for ahead of its time? Let's talk about fire for a minute, because if you've ever seen pictures of Zoroastrians, you've probably seen them in fire temples, standing before flames. People sometimes think Zoroastrians worship fire, but that's not quite right. Fire is a symbol, the ultimate symbol of Ahura Mazda's light, purity, and truth. Fire transforms things, it purifies, it gives light and warmth. In Zoroastrian temples, there's an eternal flame that burns continuously, sometimes for hundreds of years, tended by priests who keep it alive generation after generation. It's not the fire itself they're worshiping, it's what the fire represents, the eternal, unquenchable light of God that can never be extinguished, no matter how much darkness surrounds it. Now here's where the story gets really fascinating from a historical perspective. Zoroastrianism became the official religion of the Persian Empire, one of the largest, most powerful empires in ancient history. At its height, the Persian Empire stretched from Egypt to India, from the Mediterranean to Central Asia, and the religion of this superpower was Zoroastrianism. Kings like Cyrus the Great, Darius, Xerxes, these weren't just political leaders. They saw themselves as representatives of Ahura Mazda on earth, chosen to spread order and justice. And here's something incredible. Cyrus the Great, this Zoroastrian king, he's the one who freed the Jews from Babylonian captivity. He's literally named in the Bible, in the book of Isaiah, as God's anointed one, his Messiah. A Zoroastrian king called a Messiah in the Hebrew Bible. Think about that. The Jews were in exile in Babylon, their temple destroyed, their future uncertain, and it's a Zoroastrian emperor who lets them return to Jerusalem, who gives them resources to rebuild their temple. And during those decades of interaction, during the time Jews lived under Persian rule, they were exposed to Zoroastrian ideas about Satan as a cosmic adversary, about angels and demons, about resurrection and final judgment, about heaven and hell. Scholars have debated for centuries how much Zoroastrianism influenced Judaism during this period, but the parallels are impossible to ignore. Let me give you some specific examples that'll blow your mind. In early Judaism, before the Babylonian exile, you don't really see a developed concept of Satan as God's enemy. You don't see much about angels organized into hierarchies. You don't see clear teachings about resurrection and the afterlife. But after the exile, after prolonged contact with Zoroastrianism, suddenly all these ideas start appearing in Jewish texts. The book of Daniel, written after the exile, is full of apocalyptic visions that look remarkably similar to Zoroastrian prophecies. The Essenes, the Jewish sect that wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, talked about a war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, language that's straight out of Zoroastrian theology. And then Christianity emerges from Judaism, and it takes these ideas even further. Jesus talks about the kingdom of God coming to earth, about a final judgment, about resurrection, about eternal life or eternal damnation. Paul writes about spiritual warfare, about principalities and powers, about putting on the armor of light. The book of Revelation describes a final battle between good and evil, a dragon representing Satan, a new heaven and a new earth where death is no more. Every single one of these concepts can be traced back through Judaism to Zoroastrianism. I'm not saying Christianity copied Zoroastrianism, but I am saying that Zoroaster planted seeds that grew into a forest of ideas that shaped Western religion. And then Islam comes along 6 centuries after Christianity, and it too carries Zoroastrian fingerprints. The concept of the Sirat Bridge in Islam, the narrow bridge over hell that souls must cross on Judgment Day, is the Chinvat Bridge with a new name. The Day of Judgment, the resurrection of the dead, paradise and hell, angels and demons, Satan as the great deceiver, all of these are in Islam, and all of these were first articulated by Zoroaster. When the Arab Muslims conquered Persia in the 7th century CE, they found a sophisticated monotheistic religion with holy books, priests, temples, and a moral code. And while many Persians eventually converted to Islam, others maintained their Zoroastrian faith, and the exchange of ideas went both ways. So why don't more people know about Zoroastrianism today? Well, there's a tragic irony here. The religion that influenced so much of the world's spiritual thought almost disappeared. When Islam spread through Persia, many Zoroastrians converted, some by choice, some under pressure. Those who refused faced persecution. Over centuries, the Zoroastrian population dwindled. Some fled to India, where they became known as Parsis and established thriving communities. But from a religion that once dominated one of history's greatest empires, Zoroastrianism shrank to maybe 200,000 followers worldwide today. It's one of the world's oldest religions still practiced, but also one of the smallest. Yet walk into any church, any mosque, any synagogue, and you'll see Zoroaster's legacy. The idea that there's one God, that good and evil are real opposing forces, that your choices matter eternally, that history is moving to a final redemption, that the dead will rise again, that paradise awaits the righteous and punishment awaits the wicked. All of this started with a prophet in ancient Persia who looked at the world and saw it differently than anyone before him. There's something else worth talking about, the role of women in Zoroastrianism. In a world where most ancient religions relegated women to secondary status, Zoroastrianism taught that women and men were spiritual equals. Women could attend religious ceremonies, could pray directly to Ahura Mazda, and could choose their own path between good and evil just like men. There are accounts of women serving as religious teachers, of female warriors in Persian armies fighting for their faith. The emphasis on equality before God was radical for its time. Another way, it was ahead of the curve. Let me tell you about one more fascinating aspect, the Zoroastrian funeral practice. Zoroastrians traditionally don't bury their dead or cremate them because they believe earth and fire are sacred and shouldn't be polluted by death.
Instead, in what's called sky burial, they place bodies in structures called towers of silence, where vultures and the elements naturally consume the remains. To modern ears, this sounds shocking, but there's a logic to it. Return the body to nature without contaminating the sacred elements. It's a practice that's mostly died out due to modern regulations and urban development, but it shows how seriously Zoroastrians took their ecological theology. Now, think about living as a Zoroastrian in the modern world. You're part of an ancient tradition, one of the oldest religions still practiced, following teachings that are older than the New Testament by over 1,000 years. You're maintaining rituals, prayers in an ancient language, customs that your ancestors performed when the Persian Empire was at its height. There's something beautiful and sad about that. Beautiful because you're keeping alive a flame that's burned for 3,000 years. Sad because so few people even know your religion exists. Much fewer understand its massive historical importance.
But here's what's really mind-blowing when you step back and look at the big picture. One man, Zoroaster, had an idea so powerful, so transformative, that it literally shaped the spiritual landscape of half the world. The Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, which together claim over half of humanity as followers, all carry Zoroastrian DNA in their theological genetics. Every time a Christian talks about spiritual warfare, every time a Muslim mentions the Day of Judgment, every time a Jew refers to Satan as the adversary, they're echoing concepts that Zoroaster taught millennia ago. And it makes you think, doesn't it, about how ideas spread, about how one person's vision can ripple through history, influencing billions of people across thousands of years. Zoroaster probably never imagined that his teachings would shape religions that didn't even exist yet, that would influence cultures he never knew about, in lands he'd never heard of. He was just a man who looked at the world and saw that it could be better, that humans could be better, that we could choose light over darkness, truth over lies, good over evil. And he taught that this choice mattered, not just for our brief lives on earth, but for eternity. There's a power in that message that transcends time and culture. Whether you're religious or not, whether you believe in Ahura Mazda or not, something is compelling about the core Zoroastrian idea that existence is a battle between good and evil, and that we each have to choose which side we're on, not just once, but every day, in every decision, big and small. That our thoughts matter, our words matter, our deeds matter. That we're not just passive spectators in the universe, but active participants in a cosmic drama. In a world that often feels morally confused, where people struggle to define right and wrong, where relativism says everything is just a matter of perspective, Zoroastrianism stands as a 3,000-year-old testament to moral clarity. It says no, good and evil are real, they're not social constructs, they're not relative, and you need to pick a side. Every lie you tell, you're helping the forces of destruction. Every truth you speak, you're helping the forces of creation. Every act of kindness is a blow against darkness. Every act of cruelty is a betrayal of light. And maybe that's why Zoroastrianism's influence has been so profound and so lasting, because at its core it articulates something humans instinctively feel, that life is a struggle between better and worse, between our higher and lower natures, between building up and tearing down, and it says that this struggle matters, that it has cosmic significance, that the universe itself is watching to see which path you'll choose. So here we are, 3,000 years after Zoroaster walked the earth, and his ideas are still shaping how billions of people think about God, morality, the afterlife, and the meaning of existence. Not bad for a prophet most people have never heard of, right? The first monotheist, the first to teach about heaven and hell, the first to prophesy about resurrection and final judgment, the first to say that human history is moving toward an ultimate purpose. Zoroaster, the hidden architect of Western religious thought, whose name you probably didn't know before this video, but whose ideas you've been living with your entire life. Think about that the next time you hear someone talk about angels and demons, or good and evil, or heaven and hell, or the end times.
Think about a man in ancient Persia standing under desert stars who had a vision so powerful that it's still shaping human consciousness 3 millennia later. That's the legacy of Zoroastrianism. That's the power of an idea whose time had come. And here's the real question. What does it say about truth that these ideas have endured so long, influenced so broadly, resonated so deeply? Is it just cultural transmission, ideas spreading from one civilization to another? Or did Zoroaster tap into something fundamental about the universe, about human nature, about the structure of reality itself? I can't answer that for you, only you can, but it's worth thinking about. It's worth considering that maybe the reason these ideas spread so far and lasted so long is that they're pointing towards something real, something true, something eternal. So, what do you think? Knowing now that so many religious concepts we take for granted actually originated with Zoroastrianism, does that change how you see Western religion? Does it make you curious to learn more about this ancient faith that shaped so much of human thought? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective on this. And if this video opened your eyes to something you didn't know before, if it made you see history differently, then hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because we're going to keep exploring the deep philosophical and religious ideas that shaped our world. There's so much more to discover, so many more hidden connections to uncover. Thanks for watching, and remember, whether you believe in Ahura Mazda or not, the choice between good thoughts, good words, and good deeds is always in front of you. What will you choose today?